Hi everyone, my name's Leanne and today I have a massive book haul for you. I somehow have 26 books to talk to you about today that are coming onto my shelves or have come onto my shelves in recent weeks. Like, this isn't just, a weekend spending spree, but these books have come onto my shelves from various different avenues. They've had differing routes onto my shelves, and I think it really just goes to demonstrate something that I've said about how massive my TBR of unread books is that it is not just like my own purchasing decisions that grow my TBR. It's not all my fault. Now, admittedly, I do consent to these books coming onto my shelves, even though if they don't come onto my shelves via me purchasing them. But I am going to group the books by the different ways they have come onto my shelves. And I think that's just going to really demonstrate how books come into my life in various ways. I am going to start, however, with the pile that is simply my recent pre-orders. For whatever reason, a lot of the books that I pre-ordered back in December last year were published in June this year. What a great month for books that I like, or that I'm hoping I like. So I'm going to start with the paperback. This is I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue. I've read quite a few books recently that are based in offices. And this one is about Jolene, who really doesn't enjoy her job. She hates her co-workers. She's not interested in knowing anything about them. But then one day there is a massive IT screw up, which means that she gains access to everyone's emails. And this new knowledge gives her a lot of power. And she ends up uncovering stuff that is way more than she bargained for. I don't know why I've picked up a few books recently that have this kind of office setting. I don't know if it's one of those topics that millennial writers are just really interested exploring, because it can be such a significant part of people's lives, their working lives, is this kind of office culture. And I think people are a lot more interested in kind of critically analyzing that office culture now. I'm not sure. But I also really enjoy books that at the core of them have this kind of, oh my God, what would you do if that happened to you situation. I mean, is that just kind of every book? This is The Favourite by Fran Littlewood. So this is a book about three sisters. Now, I have read quite a few books about sisters, and particularly trios of sisters. And I've had such mixed experiences with them. I think some of them that I have read have been really interesting because I love kind of exploring the kind of intensity of female relationships and friendships. And I think sisterhood is just that kind of intimacy turned up to the max, and explores that kind of thing of you can simultaneously hate and love someone. But sometimes I have found, because I don't have that kind of relationship in my life, I don't have any sisters, I've struggled to kind of connect with that experience. But the subject matter of this sounds so interesting because it follows the aftermath of the father of these three girls accidentally letting slip that he has a favorite, and that brings all this family stuff to the surface. And I love messy families as well, so I'm intrigued about this one. Then I have Ordinary Love by Marie Rutkowski. So this is about the relationship between Emily and Jennifer, who fell in love when they were teenagers. And as love often is in that time of your life, it felt electric and it felt like it was going to last forever. But it didn't. And in fact, Emily and Jennifer's lives have gone in quite different directions. Jen is an Olympic athlete, has this incredible career that she has strived for. Emily has a bit more of a traditional life, that kind of traditional picture perfect life. She lives in a Manhattan townhouse. She has a husband and two kids, but actually behind closed doors, it isn't as picture perfect as people might think, as her husband, Jack, his behavior spiraled out of control. Emily and Jennifer end up seeing each other at a party, 20 years after their initial teenage romance. And the book is about whether they get a second chance of love together. So I think I will enjoy this one very much. Like most people, I recently acquired Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm a huge Taylor Jenkins Reid fan. I will read absolutely anything that she writes. And what I really love about the books that she releases is she never lets people know her next move. Would I have expected her next novel to be about a space mission in the 1980s? No, but am I excited about it? Yes, I am. I actually don't need to know anything more about the plot of this one. I trust Taylor Jenkins Reid completely. She is one of my favorite authors. So knowing that it's in the 1980s, has stuff to do with a space mission, and it is a love story, is all I need to know. Then I have one of my most anticipated releases for the whole year, and that is Skip Shock by Caroline O'Donoghue. Everything that Caroline writes, whether that is her young adult fiction or her adult fiction, I have loved her writing for years, but most people probably know her for her most recent adult novel, The Rachel Incident. This is a return to young adult for her, but feels really unique to anything that she has written before and anything that I've read before. This is a kind of like sci-fi fantasy novel that plays with the idea of time, but it's not time travel in the sense of going backwards and forwards, going to the future, going to the past. This is more about the length of days and the privilege associated with how many days you have. So we often hear people say things like, you know, we've all got the same 24 hours in the day, but that's not true because different circumstances mean you have more time to allocate to different things. And in the world of this novel, some people's days are as short as 2 hours, whereas some people have the full 24 hours. And within this world, we are also following the romance between two teen characters. I went to an event recently in Foyles where I heard Caroline talk about this book, and it made me even more excited to read it than I already was. Also at that event, I heard Sarah Maria Griffin talk about her new novel, Eat the Ones You Love. So this is a proof copy that I was given a few weeks ago. This has actually transitioned us into our next category of how I acquire things, which is getting proofs. Whether that's getting proofs from other publishers or just kind of other friends in the publishing industry that are passing proofs on to me. This one feels a little bit out of my comfort zone in terms of what I typically read. And I was already excited to push myself out of my comfort zone because I've read a few things recently that have done that. So I'm thinking She's Always Hungry, Eliza Clark's short story collection, which I thought was absolutely brilliant, but on paper didn't necessarily seem like something that I would be that into. And I think hearing the author speak about this book has made me all the more excited to read it. So this novel begins with Shell Pine, who has recently lost her fiance, she's lost her job, she's moved back in with her parents, and one day when she is doing her grocery shopping, she notices a help wanted sign in the florist. So she decides to go for this job and she ends up developing feelings for her co-worker, Neve. But actually what is really unusual and strange about this book is another character, and this character is called Baby, and Baby is an orchid that is so obsessed and in love and adores Neve that he literally wants to consume her. So really unusual, unlike this type of stuff that I typically read, but I'm really excited. And again, even more excited after hearing the author speak about it. Another proof that was recently passed my way was Ordinary Saints by Niamh Ní Mhaoileán. This was a book that I mentioned in my most anticipated Irish releases video. So this is about Jay, who was brought up a devout Catholic in Ireland, and she has since moved to London and lives with her girlfriend. She's determined to not think about her past too much, but a lot of her past is dredged up when her brother dies in a terrible accident. And it's actually looking like her brother may become a saint. And this leads to Jay having to confront her upbringing and her childhood. Explorations of Catholicism and the impact of the church in Ireland and sexuality in Ireland are all kind of topics that I'm really interested in reading about. So I'm intrigued to see what this author does with that topic. And then another proof that has come onto my shelves is Greatest of All Time by Alex Allison. So this one sounds so incredibly up my street. So this is about Samson, who is on the verge of football stardom. At 19, he joins a struggling Premier League team. And if you don't know, the Premier League is kind of like the top flight of domestic football that covers teams from England and from Wales. And when he joins this team, he is thrust into the spotlight. And he actually takes over the position as the squad number of a homegrown talent. Initially, this sparks resentment between the two men, but actually they have this undeniable bond. And I'm really excited to see what this book does with exploring sexuality in football. It's really quite commonplace for female footballers to be out and to celebrate their sexuality. It is not the case in the men's game. So I'm definitely intrigued to see what the author does with that topic in this kind of hyper masculine world. Next, I have a stack of books that I picked up at a Publishing Pride event, which was this really amazing event for like queer people in publishing to come together during Pride Month, like chat, get to know one another, and also pick up some books as well. So I picked up Becoming, which is an anthology of poems collected by Deborah Alma, and this is part of the Poetry Prescription series. So the idea behind this series is like being given a prescription for like a certain thing, like you would with like medication, and like treating poems is kind of like medication for whatever you might be interested in kind of dealing with or learning more about. This includes poems by many writers, including Stevie Smith, Mary Jean Chan, Jennifer Wong, Jackie Kay, Liz Berry, Dean Atta, Walt Whitman, Andrew Macmillan, Langston Hughes, and as I said, many, many more. So some of these poets I have read from before and know their work quite well. Some of them are new to me, which is, you know, a nice way to be introduced to new poets. Then I picked up a proof of The Bones Beneath My Sky by TJ Klune. So I read The House in the Cerulean Sea last year and I absolutely loved it. And I wasn't necessarily sure where to go next with TJ Klune, whether I would go to just the next book in that, I don't know if it's like a series or a duology, but seeing as proofs of this one were there, I decided to pick it up. And I think this is a standalone. So this is set in the spring of 1995. It's set in the year I was born. And we are following a character called Nate Cartwright. And he's at quite a liminal kind of loose end point in his life. So his parents are dead, his older brother has disowned him, and he's been fired from his job. So to try and find a sense of direction, he heads to his family's summer cabin in Oregon. Now this cabin should be empty, but turns out it's not. Inside there is a man named Alex and an extraordinary little girl who calls herself Artemis Darth Vader. And there is a lot more to this girl that meets the eye. And the blurb says this is an action-packed supernatural road trip. I don't know where this falls on like the coziness scale compared to House in the Cerulean Sea, but I do think TJ Klune is another author that pushes me like slightly out of my comfort zone in like reading more fantasy, and I really loved that book, so I'm intrigued to see what I think of this one. I also picked up How to Leave the House by Nathan Newman, and this sounds like just such an intriguing, like funny premise for a book. So our main character is called Nat West, and it is the last day before he leaves town. But there is something that he is really fixated on. This package that has not arrived, he's ordered it to his house, it's not there, and it's really embarrassing. And if this package doesn't arrive and he can get his hands on it, his life will unravel. And we follow him over the next 24 hours, interacting with a whole host of characters on this kind of desperate quest to make sure he gets this package. So I'm very intrigued. I need to know what is in this package. What could be so embarrassing and why will it unravel his life? Then I also have this graphic novel. I actually have no idea where I'm going to put this on my shelf. It is so massive. Whenever I get a chance to get a new graphic novel, I absolutely leap at the opportunity because I really enjoy graphic novels when I read them. This one is set in Paris. It is a love story between a boy and a vampire. And actually, that is all I need to know. It's called Le Normau. I have exactly zero French skills. I did German in school. And this is by Janine Jansen with S.L. Sabedo. I think this is probably one that I will try and keep on my shelves until Halloween. I think my urge with graphic novels is always to read them like immediately because they are quite quick and like fun and cozy reads. But I think this one deserves to be read in like an October like cozy evening. And then the final book I picked up at that event was What a Girl Wants by Roxy Bordillon. And this is the author's true story of sexuality and self-discovery. It charts her experiences of being a young woman that loves women and the messiness of figuring her life out. And I'm always intrigued by stories like that explore young womanhood, and particularly with that intersection of sexuality as a theme as well. Okay, back to books that I really am completely responsible for them being on my shelves. Like I know I'm completely responsible for all of them, but I digress. So I picked up 2 books secondhand, and I think what this demonstrates is that book buying for new books and looking for books in like secondhand stores are kind of 2 different hobbies. Like they have 2 different vibes. But I picked up a copy of Here is the Beehive by Sarah Crossan. Sarah Crossan is another one of my favorite writers. Typically she writes in verse, which is a form that I'm really drawn to as a method of storytelling. Now I read Here is the Beehive a few years ago and I didn't get on with it as much as I have done with other Sarah Crossan books. And I think that's because I came to it with so much baggage around the idea of cheating. I just couldn't really read about it at all. It just really turned me off whatever I was consuming around that topic, whether it was a book, a TV show, whatever. And I'm really intrigued to reread this one and find out whether, you know, years later, where that doesn't feel like so emotionally raw for me, whether I would feel differently about this book, because I do remember thinking like, this is brilliantly written, but I just have too much baggage around that subject matter. So at least this one isn't adding to my TBR, but I definitely would like to reread it. So it kind of is. And then I also picked up a copy of Girlfriends by Holly Bourne, and this was such a silly purchase, and let me tell you for why. So I love Holly Bourne. She is another one of my favorite writers, but I have been saying I'm not going to acquire any more Holly Bourne books because I have 2 of her books unread on my shelves. Now, I recently read one of those, which made me feel like I had permission to buy another one of her books. And I saw this secondhand in hardback, and I don't know why I bought it in hardback, because I recently unhauled another Holly Bourne book because it was in hardback, because the hardback was taking up too much space on my shelves, and I was like, I'm going to replace that with a paperback, which I intend to do. But then I went and bought another one of her books in hardback. So once I read this, am I also just going to be like, I'm going to get rid of it and replace it with a paperback? It was a stupid buying decision, but nonetheless, I'm very excited to read this book. So this is about the friendship between Fern and Jessica. So when they first meet, when they are teenagers, they become best friends. Despite their differences, they are always there for each other, always help each other through whatever they're going through. That is until Jessica crosses a line that Fern cannot forgive. Now, more than 10 years later, they have reappeared in each other's lives, and this book follows them as they reconnect and look at how their relationship might be different now that they are older. So this idea of, a second chance relationship is explored a lot in relation to kind of romantic relationships, but I'm really intrigued to see what this does with that idea of a second chance friendship. And I've already mentioned this, but the idea of exploring the intensity of female relationships and the intimacy of female friendships is something that I'm really intrigued by. I have just seen that this is also signed and dedicated to someone called Lauren, so I'm definitely not going to keep this. Who the fuck is Lauren? Literally, what I'm going to do is read that and then unhaul it and then replace it with a paperback. Silly. I also had some vouchers to spend, so I picked up 2 books with those. So I got Funny Story by Emily Henry. So I am a little bit behind on the Emily Henry train. Whilst I understand it like commercially and from a business POV, I'm not interested in her now being published in hardback. I will definitely always be a paperback girly for Emily Henry, but I'm a little bit behind on reading her books. I'm reading Happy Place at the minute, but I feel like I'm in a really safe pair of hands with Emily Henry's books. I feel like I will always enjoy them. And the relationship dynamics explored in this one sound so silly, and I'm there for it. I love contemporary books that kind of just have a thought experiment. Let me try and explain this the best that I can. So Peter and Petra are together. They were childhood best friends, and now that they are grown up, they are together. But this book actually looks at the relationship between their respective exes. So we have Daphne, who is Peter's ex, and Miles, who is Petra's ex. They end up sharing a room together, and while they are complete opposites, they are kind of the only other person that is understanding how the other is feeling and the predicament that the other person is in. And they decide one night that they are gonna form this plan where they start deliberately posting things about how much fun that they are having together, posting all these photos on social media about all the fun, and it's all for show because they just kind of want to get tongues wagging. But of course, they actually end up developing feelings for one another. I just love the setup and how messy that dynamic of exes getting together. So I think this will be a lot of fun. And then I also picked up The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. So this premise ticks a lot of boxes for me. I was just saying, I love books that have kind of a thought experiment at the core of them. I love books that can explore contemporary ideas but with a speculative edge, and that is definitely what this book is. So we are following our main character Lauren, who one day finds a strange man in her flat that is claiming to be her husband, and he is actually able to present a lot of evidence that kind of proves that he is. But really what is going on is that her attic is creating husbands for her. So she can send the husband back up to the attic and a different husband will come down, and she's kind of going through these men until she finds the one that she really wants to keep. This ticks so many boxes for me in terms of it being a contemporary novel with a speculative element to it, but I have heard a lot of negative reviews about this one from people whose opinions I really trust. So I'm not sure what I'm going to think of this one. Okay, next I'm going to talk about some books that I got from work. We recently had a big clear out of our office, so I picked up some of the books that I was interested in from my colleagues in the adult team. So I have Probably Nothing from Lauren Bravo. So this is about Bryony, who doesn't really mind being single, but despite this, she keeps seeing and sleeping with this guy called Ed. After their 5th date, she develops the ick and she's decided that she's going to end things with Ed. But then she receives a phone call that tells her that Ed has actually died. And it turns out that he has been telling his friends and family quite a lot about her, and he has represented his relationship with the great love of his life. And Lauren kind of just ends up going along with this. She's kind of drawn in by the charisma and the chaos of Ed's family and ends up entangled in this web of lies lies, pretending that, yeah, they were in a more kind of significant relationship than she believed. Again, sounds messy. I'm here for it. Then I have Date with Destiny by Lucy Vine. So this is about Ginny, who is approaching her 32nd birthday, and she has been thinking about a psychic that she saw 16 years ago who made some predictions about what would happen in her 32nd year. So she predicted 3 bad things: a heartbreak, a loss of independence, and a death, and 3 good things: a life-changing trip, reconnecting with someone, and meeting her soulmate. Now, Ginny's trying to tell herself that this is all nonsense, especially because she is getting married in a month. But when some of those predictions start to come true, she finds herself wondering whether even more of them will. So that sounds like a lot of fun. I do actually have these 2 authors' previous books already on my shelves, so I do want to read those first before reading these. Then I picked up Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. So this is the 10th anniversary collector's edition of this book. I remember reading Rupi Kaur for the first time back in 2016. I have such a vivid memory of cozy reading evening in my university bedroom, and at that time those poems just felt so intimate and important, and I would be really intrigued to revisit these poems and see what I think of them now, many years later. This collector's edition has some new poems, it's got some new introductions, some behind the scenes stuff, and I think it is really gorgeously put together, so I'm very pleased to have this one on my shelves. I also picked up a non-fiction book, so this is Everything You Need to Know About the Pill by Kate Moore. So I have another one of this author's books on my shelves, and it's Everything You Need to Know About the Menopause. I haven't read that yet, but I really want to, and whilst I am assuming that the menopause is, a while away from me, you never know, and I do also think that, information is power, knowledge is power. This book about the pill is far more relevant to my current life situation. I am a little bit scared to read it though, because whilst I believe that knowledge is power, I do also think that ignorance is bliss, but I probably should read this one. And then finally, I have some books that I picked up relevant to my own job. So I'm going to whiz through these ones super quickly. This is Super Unicorn Princess by Mike Hartigan. So this is the first in a new graphic novel series, which is all about our superhero main character, Super Unicorn Princess, who is saving the city of Horizon. And she definitely gives really strong Powerpuff Girls vibes. Then I have Call Your Boyfriend by Olivia A. Cole and Ashley Woodfolk. This is a queer novel that is kind of like a love triangle stitched onto another love triangle. So this is about 2 girls who realize they have both been hooking up with the same person. So immediately there's tension and enemies vibes between the 2 of them, but they then find out that that girl that they have both been hooking up with is actually going to prom with a boy. So these 2 girls that have both been slighted by this girl at the center of all of this decide to come together. It sounds messy, and I am so here for it. Then another young adult romance, I have The Last Wish List by Jacqueline Sylvester. So when Nadia's best friend Lizzie dies, she left her with her last wish list. So 16 things that she wanted her friend to do to get over the grief of losing her. This takes her on this wild kind of road trip, and along the way she meets a boy named Fran. And they set out on this road trip of a lifetime along Route 66, and of course, things go from there. Another YA, I have The Survivor Wants to Die at the End by Adam Silvera. So this is the next book that is in the death cast world that people probably know best from They Both Die at the End. And this book way more kind of significantly explores themes of mental health and things like suicide ideation within the framework of death cast. And I think that's such an interesting dynamic to add to the world of Deathcast. And then finally, I have Wolf Mountain by Alice Roberts. So this is the follow-up to Wolf Road. We're following the same main character that we met in Wolf Road, and again, is an exploration of prehistoric times from an author who is the expert on this time period in history. So there we have it. They are all of the books I'm going to talk to you about today. Do leave me a comment down below and let me know if you've read any of them, if you have any thoughts on them. Do you think I'm going to like them? Thank you for staying to the end of the video, because we had a lot of books to talk about today. If you want to let me know you're here but you don't have anything in particular to say, leave me an emoji that is somehow related to space in honor of Atmosphere, Taylor Jenkins Reid's new book. Some moons, some stars, maybe there's a rocket ship emoji. I don't know. Leave me something related to space. That's it for me today. I hope you're well, and I'll speak to you in my next video.